Hello, welcome to Planetary Evolution, a space to discuss our path towards peace and consciousness. I'm your host, Jared Angaza. Let's talk about guns and sociopaths, shall we? And I could probably broaden it a bit as well. Let's go. At the end of the day, we're talking about perspective. I've talked a lot about, always, the perspective of fear, and when our perspective is rooted in fear because of the things that have influenced us, the experiences that have happened to us, the media that we intake, the environment around us. When we are operating from a perspective of fear, we begin to see things differently. We begin to experience things differently. My experience of a situation may be very different than someone else's experience of a situation because of their experiences prior to that, because of their influence prior to that, which has fueled their perspective. So we have a perspective situation. So at the end of the day, if we're looking at why do we have so much violence? Why do we have so many, why do we have such a lust for guns? And people so quick to say, oh, why we have to have guns because of X, Y, Z. There's nothing on the other end of that argument that I would ever agree with, by the way. We don't have to have guns at all. And then certainly not because the other guy always has a gun. That's a ridiculous argument. And the easiest cop-out to get out of the discussion is say, well, they have guns, we gotta have guns. When does that stop? When did we get to a point that just said, oh, well, all right, we have a situation where there's so many guns, let's just say in this room instead of the world, because that's fathomable. In this room, there's too many guns. Everybody has to have guns, and we're just going to shoot until everybody's dead. As opposed to saying, those guys have guns over there. Let's figure out a way to make this work. I believe that we can do that. I believe that we can disarm ourselves, and it is going to be an act of disarming ourselves. Because at the end of the day, no one's going to come in and do it for us. We have to agree to lay down our guns. We talk about, oh, well, there's sociopaths out there. I heard this argument on Facebook the other day. Not a great place to have a conversation, I agree. However, somebody was saying, oh, well, there's sociopaths out there, so I got to have a gun so I can protect myself from a sociopath. Short-term thinking. We talk about, this is risky, I know, but abortion clinics. We got guys on, on the red side saying, no abortion clinics, and we got guys on the blue side saying we have a right to choose and so on. And at the end of the day, I have to say, why don't we address the perspective that is constantly fueling so many mass shootings, so many people? I mean, all of these discussions that we're having all come back to the perspective that's fueling that particular issue. Oh, I have to protect myself from a sociopath. Why do we have so many sociopaths in the United States of America? Why don't we talk about that? Why don't we address the perspective that's creating all these sociopaths? If we didn't have so many sociopaths, we wouldn't have guys on the other end saying I have to have a gun because I have to protect myself from a sociopath. That continues to go on with the abortion scenario. Well, why do we have so many people that feel that they need abortions? Why is that such a high prevalency in the United States? Why do we have the highest suicide rate of any other country in the world? We can talk about suicide prevention, and we can talk about all these other mechanisms that revolve around suicide and all that. Not to mention the fact that when a gun is involved with suicide, it is almost always fatal. When a gun is not involved, there's a chance someone might make it through. And there's many, many, many cases of that where someone makes it through. They come out the other side, they figure out something about life, they have a beautiful epiphany or something, and they've hit rock bottom, and they go forth, and they have more of a life that they wanted to have. But when a gun is involved, that doesn't happen very often. So I look at a gun as a tool for destruction only. Yet we use it as a cop-out to say, well, I have to have one because there's all these other bad things out there. Why don't we address those bad things? Bad things. Why don't we address that? Why don't we address the perspective that fosters so much of that mentality here, so much of that fear that makes us believe that we have to have a gun to get peace? How does that work? How does a gun become an instrument of peace? I have lived all over the world, from Rwanda to Congo to Uganda to Kenya, East Africa, the United States, and spending time in the north, the south, all over the United States, in some of the craziest places out there. I have never in my life seen a gun bring peace to any situation, period. So at the end of the day, when we talk about sociopaths and abortion, and we talk about suicide and all these other negative elements of our society that are, and the mass shootings and the police violence and all these things, rather than focusing on gun policy and gun laws, which I do think helps to eliminate the immediate threat, and I do think that's important, and I'm involved in some of those things, I really want to put the focus, which is why I've started this channel, on transcending out of the perspective that makes us think we need all those guns, that makes us think that that brings peace or security. Anytime a gun brings security to you in terms of a feeling or an emotion you're feeling, it's always a false sense anyway. At the end of the day, you've just engaged in a violent transaction. If you have a gun and there's another person on the other side, gun, knife, nothing, whatever, it doesn't matter. You've engaged in a violent scenario. When you don't have a gun, you may be an innocent bystander. Hey, God forbid, something bad might happen. But at some point, we have to, as the people, have to break the cycle. That requires a commitment. It requires patience. It requires a change of perspective. It requires resilience, for sure. And it requires us mostly to step back and think long-term rather than short-term. So that's my feeling on guns and violence and sociopaths and all the other things. I will talk more about guns, I'm sure, because it's sort of a hot topic at the moment with all the mass shootings and the institutionalized racism that often evolves, if you will, into, I shouldn't say evolves, it often ends up in getting us into violent situations. And the fact that this is reaching a pandemic level in the United States, this is ridiculous. I just spent 10 years living in East Africa, and I come back to the United States, and I'm like, what on earth has happened while I was away? I came back originally during the Ferguson tragedy. That was my intro back into the United States after coming from East Africa. And here we are, a year or so later, and now we've got all this other stuff going on. Continued mass shootings. Mass shooting is like a regular buzzword in the headlines today. We have to move beyond that. I hope you choose peace. And I hope you're thriving, and I wish you strength and peace as you evolve into life.